The sky over western Germany was a dull white on the 8th of November 1944. A faint haze spread across the upper air, blurring the horizon into a line of light. Below, fields stripped bare by war stretched toward Aachen. Smoke drifted from bombed rail yards. Somewhere, artillery rolled like distant thunder. At 12:47 hours, 4 American P-47 Thunderbolts of the 56th Fighter Group crossed that sky at 24,000 feet. They were heavy, broad-winged, slow-climbing machines built for punishment more than elegance. Each carried 8 Browning machine guns and half a ton of ammunition. They were there to escort 2 groups of bombers returning from strikes on Düren and Cologne. Their job was simple: protect the bombers, destroy what could threaten them, come home. Lieutenant Donald W. Emerson flew second position. Call sign, Bunghole Red 2. 21 years old. From a wheat farm outside Topeka, Kansas. He wore his oxygen mask loose, the strap frayed. He kept a photograph of his sister taped to the control panel. He had written her the night before. "It's getting cold up here. I like it better that way. Makes the sky look clean." He did not know that the next hour would change aviation history. The first sign. At 12:53, the lead pilot, Captain James Cannon, spotted movement above the contrails, 2 small silver objects descending at unnatural speed. They moved without propellers. They moved too fast. Cannon radioed. "Bandits. High 12. Fast movers. Watch your 6. The formation broke. Emerson rolled left, scanning. His canopy caught a flash, 2 glints of sunlight slicing downward, cutting through cloud like knives. Then, the air shook. A roar like tearing metal. Not the hum of piston engines, but a smooth, high-pitched scream. For a moment, the sky itself seemed to split. The shapes were sleek, shark-like, twin engines on swept wings. They came from the future. The Messerschmitt Me 262, the first operational jet fighter in human history. It closed on the bombers in seconds. A burst of 30mm cannon fire ripped through the formation. 1 B-26 exploded, fragments tumbling through cloud. Another caught fire. The jets pulled up, curving effortlessly away, climbing faster than anything Emerson had ever seen. Cannon yelled, "They're jets! They're goddamn jets!" The decision. Emerson could have stayed with formation. He could have followed orders, hold altitude, protect the remaining bombers. But something in him refused to let the unknown escape. He banked hard right, dropped throttle, and dived. The airspeed needle rose 350, 400, 420. He felt the frame shudder as drag screamed against metal. Below, the twin jets leveled off, heading east. He chased. The Me 262 seconds had finished their run. They believed no propeller aircraft could catch them. They were wrong. As Emerson descended, gravity lent him speed. The Thunderbolt became a projectile. At 480 miles per hour, it could almost touch the edge of the jet's realm. He closed the distance to one of the 2 slightly slower, perhaps a new pilot, perhaps cautious with his fragile engines. The jet's tail filled his gun sight. He squeezed the trigger. 8 Brownings roared. The tracers arced forward, invisible until they struck metal. The first rounds missed. The second burst hit. A trail of smoke appeared behind the right engine. The Me 262 tried to climb. Its pilot pulled throttle, but the turbine lagged 6 seconds before response. In combat, 6 seconds is an eternity. Emerson stayed on him. He fired again. Short bursts, 2 seconds each. More hits, one near the fuselage, another under the cockpit. The jet rolled right, nose down. A black flame erupted from its rear. Then it began to spin. At 16,000 feet, it disintegrated. Pieces fluttered like burnt paper. The confirmation. The squadron radio crackled. Cannon's voice. "You got him, Red 2. "You got the son of a bitch." Silence followed. No cheers. Just static and breathing. Emerson leveled out, breathing hard. He had just done something no one had believed possible. A piston-driven fighter had shot down the world's first jet. He returned to base low on fuel. Ground crew found bullet holes in his wings, probably from the Me-262's defensive fire. He said little during debriefing. When asked how he'd managed it, he replied, "I just pulled the trigger until it burned." The intelligence officer added a note to the report. First confirmed destruction of enemy jet aircraft by Lieutenant Donald W. Emerson, 336th Fighter Squadron. It was a sentence that marked the twilight of one age and the dawn of another. War is a contest of machines as much as men. In 1944, the air war over Europe was both industrial and personal, a collision of factories, doctrines, and nerves. The Thunderbolt, the last of the giants. The P-47 Thunderbolt was America's hammer. It was enormous for a single-engine fighter, wingspan 40 feet, length 36. Powered by a Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine producing over 2,000 horsepower. Empty weight, 10,000 pounds. Loaded weight, up to 17,500. It could climb to 30,000 feet and dive at 550 miles per hour. Its fuel capacity, 305 gallons internal, plus 2 drop tanks, gave it range enough to escort bombers deep into Germany. It carried 8 50-caliber machine guns, each capable of firing 850 rounds per minute. A 2-second burst released 200 bullets, roughly 100 pounds of metal and lead in the air. That was its power. Not speed, but density. Pilots called it the Jug. It could absorb flak, fire, shrapnel, and still fly home on one cylinder. Its cockpit armor was thicker than some tanks. It was not agile, but it was indestructible. In the European theater, the Thunderbolt became legend not for beauty, but survival. Of 15,683 built, most completed dozens of missions. It was a machine for ordinary men to do extraordinary things. The Me-262, the first jet fighter. The Messerschmitt Me 262 was not ordinary. It was a machine out of sequence, an aircraft born 20 years too soon. Twin Junkers Jumo 4B axial flow turbojet engines. Thrust, 1,980 pounds each. Top speed, 540 miles per hour at altitude. Ceiling, 37,500 feet. Armament, 4 Mk 108 30mm cannons, capable of destroying a bomber with a 3-second burst. It could carry R-4M air-to-air rockets under its wings, unguided but deadly in salvos. It was faster than anything in the sky, but fragile. Its engines lasted barely 25 hours before burning out. Throttle response was slow. Sudden acceleration could cause catastrophic flameout. It required long, paved runways. Most were cratered by Allied bombers. Its landing gear was delicate. Its production lines were bombed weekly. Only a few hundred reached operational units. Even fewer ever fought. In the air, the Me-262 was terrifying. On the ground, it was a nightmare of maintenance. The meeting of two ages. When Emerson's P-47 met that Me-262, the encounter was not just combat, it was transition. The piston engine, perfected over 4 decades, faced the jet turbine, newly born. The Thunderbolt represented the cumulative logic of industry refinement, repetition, reliability. The Me-262 represented the desperate brilliance of collapse innovation without infrastructure. Each was a triumph of its nation's circumstances. Each revealed its nation's soul. The result was not just a kill. It was a conversation between centuries, spoken in gunfire. Donald Emerson was not meant for history. He was meant for soil. Born the 12th of April 1923 in Shawnee County, Kansas. One of 4 children. His father, Clarence, owned a small wheat farm. His mother, Ruth, taught Sunday school. Their lives were defined by seasons: sowing, waiting, harvesting. They measured time not in months but in rains. He learned to drive a tractor at 9. He shot his first rifle at 10. He graduated from high school in 1941, the year before Pearl Harbor. He joined the Army Air Forces the next spring. His draft interview described him as calm, mild, dependable. No one wrote brave. No one needed to. In letters home, he described flight in the language of weather. Clouds move here like wheat fields in wind. You can see them ripple. He wrote little about fear. Farmers do not write about storms. They endure them. That endurance would become his only weapon, more powerful than his machine. Learning to fly. Flight school in Texas. Cadet Class 43F. Training aircraft. PT-19. AT-6 Texan. P-40 Warhawk. He learned navigation by sun and map, long before radar. He learned to roll and dive, to trust instruments more than instinct. He learned that altitude equals life. Instructors called him Steady Don. He never topped a class, never failed one either. He flew exactly by the book until the day the book had no answers. By 1944, he was assigned to the 56th Fighter Group, 63rd Squadron, based at Boxted, England. Commanded by Colonel Hubert Hub Zemke, the 56th was the top-scoring American fighter group in Europe. Their motto, "As long as we have one plane, we fight." He arrived quiet, polite, unassuming. The older pilots liked him immediately. They teased him for his Kansas drawl. They taught him poker. He taught them how to read clouds. The first missions. Combat over Europe was not glamorous. It was waiting mostly. Hours of sky, minutes of terror. Escort missions for bombers over Bremen, Hamburg, the Ruhr. Cold so intense oxygen masks froze solid. German flak that burst black blossoms across formation. Emerson's first combat victory came in August 1944 and FW 190 near Bonn. His combat report was 32 words long. Enemy aircraft turned left across my nose. Fired short burst. Observed smoke, then explosion. Broke right. Returned to base. That was all. He never used adjectives. By November, he had flown 49 missions. His flight leader called him a machine with a heartbeat. He would fly his 50th the day he saw the jet. To understand what Emerson did, one must understand what it meant to be a pilot in 1944. A dogfight is not motion, it is geometry. It is energy management, velocity, and distance. In a piston fighter, the pilot does not fight the enemy, he fights physics. Every climb steals speed. Every dive buys momentum. Every turn spends altitude. The P-47, being heavy, demanded patience. The Me 262, being fast, demanded foresight. The faster plane cannot turn quickly. The slower one cannot escape. Victory belongs to the one who manages energy best. Emerson did not know theory. He only knew rhythm, the same rhythm that guided his father's plow. The moment the Me 262 turned early, he read it like a wind shift. He cut across its arc. He fired where it would be, not where it was. That is instinct. That is farm wisdom translated to airspeed. The Me 262 pilot that day was Oberleutnant Hans Guido Mutka of Jagdgeschwader 7. He was 23. He had joined the Luftwaffe at 18, flown Bf 109 seconds over Russia, and converted to jets only a month earlier. He was trained in airspeed but not experience. No one truly understood how to fight in 3 dimensions at 540 miles per hour. Mutke survived the crash. His parachute opened at 10,000 feet. He landed in a forest near Durin and was captured by an American patrol the next morning. When interrogated, he said, "The engines burned. I saw tracer fire. I thought it impossible they could catch me. For Mater, this isn't protected for We haven't made her. This is a mater for. This is a mater. We haven't made her. Problem ensue. We haven't made her. He did not believe he'd been shot down by a Thunderbolt. He insisted it must have been flak. When shown wreckage later, he said nothing. VI. The Air War, in November 1944. By late 1944, the air war over Europe had become a contest of exhaustion. Germany was running out of fuel, out of pilots, out of sky. The Allies were running out of patience. Every morning, formations of hundreds of bombers crossed the Channel. Every evening, fewer came back. Above 20,000 feet, the war was fought not in color but in contrast, silver against gray, condensation trails weaving like scars. The Luftwaffe had once dominated this sky. Now it fought only in fragments, squadrons of survivors with dwindling machines. The Me-262 was its last miracle. General Adolf Galland, head of the Luftwaffe Fighter Command, had promised Hitler that jets could change the air war overnight. They did not. They arrived too slowly, too few, too late. But for the men who first met them, they were terrifying. The Me-262's speed erased the familiar rules of pursuit. Its approach gave no warning. Its escape offered no chance. It could climb away from every Allied aircraft except in one narrow window of vulnerability when it slowed for attack or landing. That weakness was what Emerson found, not by design, but by instinct. At Boxted Airfield that evening, the mess hall smelled of coffee, oil, and wet leather. Pilots crowded around a chalkboard. Emerson stood at the edge, helmet still in hand. He spoke quietly as the intelligence officer recorded. 2 bogies, twin engine, no props, came out of sun, fired at bombers. I dove, hit one. Range? Maybe 200 yards. Type of aircraft? He paused. Didn't look like anything I know. They sketched it for him. Twin nacelles. Swept tail. Nose cannons. That's it, he said. It screamed, not roared. The officer underlined a note. Possibly new enemy type. He did not write jet. That word still sounded experimental, not operational. When Emerson left the room, he walked outside to the dark airfield. Engines throbbed in the distance. He looked up, saw the faint shimmer of aurora over the North Sea. He thought of home, of wind over wheat, of silence. He did not know that people in Washington and London would read his report within hours, nor that it would confirm what Allied intelligence had feared for months. Germany had fielded a working jet fighter. The Me-262 had begun life years earlier as the Project 1065, a research prototype. The first test flight occurred in 1942, powered by conventional piston engines, while the jet turbines were still being perfected. The engineers at Messerschmitt's Augsburg factory fought physics itself. Turbine blades melted, compressors failed, materials cracked under heat. Germany's industrial base could not mass-produce the exotic alloys jet engines required. Each Jumo 004 turbine contained 2,600 precision components. It took weeks to build and hours to destroy. Every shortage, nickel, chromium, molybdenum, translated directly into failure. By late 1944, even the bearings inside the engines were made of inferior steel that wore out within days. Yet Hitler demanded results. He insisted the Me-262 be converted into a blitz bomber, a fast strike aircraft to attack Allied bridges and troop columns. The engineers protested. They were ignored. Fighter production stalled while bomb racks were fitted to prototypes. The result was chaos, a weapon of extraordinary speed shackled by politics. By the time the fighter version re-emerged, the skies were already lost. Across the Atlantic, the United States had mastered something Germany could not: mass standardization. The P-47 Thunderbolt came off the line every hour. Parts were interchangeable. Engines shipped by rail. A single Pratt & Whitney plant in Connecticut produced more horsepower each month than all of Germany's remaining aircraft factories combined. American aviation was not about innovation, it was about scale. And scale wins wars. The Thunderbolt's design philosophy was brutal simplicity. Protect the pilot at all costs. Deliver firepower. Endure damage. It was the mechanical expression of America's industrial temperament. Redundant, heavy, unstoppable. The Me-262 represented genius under siege. The P-47 represented persistence under surplus. In the long arc of history, persistence always outlasts genius. What happens to thought when time compresses? For pilots, seconds stretch into eternities and then vanish again. Fear and calculation merge. Adrenaline replaces imagination. A pilot in combat is less a man than a reflex sustained by discipline. Emerson later told a chaplain he never felt fear until after landing. Up there, you don't have time to be scared. It's just you and the gauges. He described the jet as beautiful, like a bullet. The chaplain wrote in his notebook, he speaks of it without hate. That detachment, half serenity, half fatigue, was typical of late war pilots. After 50 missions, they no longer fought for country or creed. They fought because the act itself became the only rhythm left. Fly, escort, return, eat, sleep, fly again. For Emerson, the sky had turned into the same repetition as the fields of his youth. Rows of clouds instead of rows of wheat. Patterns, cycles, endurance. Oberleutnant Mutke spent 3 months in an American POW camp. He was questioned by intelligence officers about jet technology. He told them the Me-262 was a miracle that kills itself. He described throttle lag, the danger of flameout, the fragile landing gear. He admitted the engines often failed even before takeoff. But he also said, when it flew, nothing could touch it. His report was forwarded to engineers at Wright Field in Ohio. They were astonished by the details: axial compressors, afterburner concepts, swept wings. They realized that the war had briefly opened a window into the future. Within months, American scientists began their own jet experiments using captured parts. The lineage of the F-86 Sabre would trace directly to those interrogations. Mutke was repatriated to Germany in 1946. He returned to medical school, became a doctor, and never flew again. When asked in later years about the battle, he simply said, "I met a man who flew slower than me but thought faster." 2 weeks after his victory, Emerson flew again. Weather: snow over the Ardennes. Mission: ground attack near Koblenz. It was the 24th of December 1944, Christmas Eve. The Battle of the Bulge was at its height. His group strafed German convoys moving through forest roads. Flak burst in black clouds. On the third pass, his P-47 took a direct hit. Witnesses saw it trailing smoke, then disappearing into the mist. He was killed instantly. He was 21. The news reached Bokstead on Christmas morning. His bunkmate packed his belongings: a Bible, a pocket knife, and a letter he had written but never mailed. It read, "The sky is getting colder. Maybe that's good. Cold keeps you awake." He was buried first in a temporary military cemetery near Ham. After the war, his body was returned to Kansas. In the years that followed, the war consumed memory itself. Jets became normal. The Me-262 was dismantled, studied, forgotten. The P-47 was replaced by sleeker machines: the P-51, the F-80, the F-86. The generation that had fought with propellers watched their own triumphs become obsolete within 5 years. Yet among aviation historians, Emerson's name survived in footnotes. First Allied pilot to destroy enemy jet aircraft. It was a sentence both vast and narrow. It contained an era within its simplicity. At the Air Force Museum decades later, curators placed a P-47 beside a restored Me-262. Visitors read the plaques, compared statistics, and moved on. But some lingered at the small caption beneath the Thunderbolt's nose: Donald W. Emerson, 336th Fighter Squadron, the 8th of November, 1944. No photo. No biography. Just a name and a date. As if the event spoke for itself, the duel between Emerson and the Me 262 was not about bravery or chance alone. It was the visible symptom of deeper truths about industrial warfare. Germany had become a laboratory without a supply chain. Its engineers imagined beyond its factories. Its inventions outran its resources. The Me 262, the V-2 rocket, the Type XXI submarine, all marvels conceived in desperation. America, by contrast, was a factory without imagination but with infinite fuel. Its strength was repetition. Its machines were not extraordinary, they were numerous. Each Thunderbolt was one among thousands. Each pilot replaceable. Each mission scheduled like a production run. The contrast explains the outcome. Wars are not won by miracles. They are won by systems that can fail safely and recover quickly. The Me 262 could not fail safely. Every breakdown meant a loss of months. Every loss meant fewer defenders. Every pilot lost was irreplaceable. The Thunderbolt could fail 100 times and still take off the next day. That endurance, mechanical, logistical, human, is the true definition of power. After 1945, the world accelerated. Engines no longer turned, they burned. Propellers became obsolete in the span of a college education. By 1950, combat was measured not in altitude but in Mach numbers. By 1960, missiles had replaced dogfights. By 1970, the sky Emerson knew had become a memory, quiet, manual, human. Yet his story marks the hinge point between those worlds. It is the moment when instinct still mattered, when sight and sound still ruled. After that day, machines began to think faster than men could. Emerson's bullet streams were the last handwriting of the propeller age across the canvas of the sky. Technology changes, but fear does not. Every pilot from Emerson to the astronauts who later broke orbit feels the same pulse before flight, that thin line between control and chaos. In Emerson's time, the line was drawn by airspeed. Today, it is drawn by code. But the equation is unchanged. Machine plus man equals risk. The lesson is not nostalgia for a slower world. It is recognition that progress always carries amnesia. We forget the human texture beneath the data, the smell of oil, the trembling of metal, the breath that fogs the oxygen mask. History compresses all that into a statistic. A name, a date, a claim. First man to shoot down a jet. But beneath it was a heartbeat, steady as the Kansas wind. In Topeka, the Emerson farm still exists. The wheat fields stretch the same way they did in 1944. Each spring, the wind moves across them in long, silver waves. From the ground, it looks like the surface of the sky turned upside down. A local historical society placed a small plaque near the county road. Here grew Lieutenant Donald W. Emerson, U.S. Army Air Forces. First to down an enemy jet in aerial combat. No one stops often. Trucks pass, dust rises, settles again. The prairie endures as it always has, indifferent, infinite, patient. If you stand there on a still day, you can hear distant engines from the nearby airbase. Jets now, of course. Faster, higher, untouchable. But they carry, faintly, the echo of a piston, turning somewhere far below history's noise. The story of the farm boy and the jet is not about victory. It is about transition. It is about the moment when human skill still mattered against speed. When touch could still defeat thrust. When courage could still bridge the gap between eras. Technology always promises to replace the human element. It never quite does. Machines extend will, they do not erase it. The farm boy proved that once, briefly, in a cold German sky, he came from a world where men measured distance by fields, not miles. He entered one where distance was measured by death. He flew between them and never returned. When historians speak of the jet age, they often start with engineers, generals, designs. They should start with him. Because before the Me-262 became an icon of progress, it was simply a target in one man's sight. And before the jet age began, it ended for a few seconds at the hands of a boy who had learned the patience of wind and the precision of harvest. That is how eras truly change, not in laboratories, but in moments of contact between ordinary men and extraordinary machines. He saw something faster than sound. He heard something older than fear. He aimed, he fired, he ended a century and began another.